Mark Carney says to Donald Trump, he's talked to the owners of Canada. We're not for sale. Yes, my friends, we are not for sale. And guess what? It is cottage season coming up. You may want to buy a cottage. All this and more with our good friend and mortgage broker, Mr. Dion Beck, right after this. Here we are, my friends, with our favorite mortgage broker in all of the land, Mr. Dion Beck. How you doing, my man?
I'm good, Gary. How's things?
Things are excellent here. I say that with a little chuckle because over the last week or so, you know what's happened in Canada. We all know what's happened in Canada.
Yeah, so we've had an election and a trip to the White House.
A trip to the White House, all wrapped up in a nice little package, one might say. And whether you voted blue, red, or anything else, Canada has its official elected leader right now, right? Let's focus on moving forward together as a country. Forget whether it's right or wrong. It doesn't matter. It's moving forward with a positive outlook, right?
Yeah, I think, there's a period where certain people from certain beliefs or party backgrounds will feel a certain thing, and that's totally fine. But yeah, once we're beyond that, it's like, okay, well, we've got 4 years ahead of us now, so let us just figure out how this person can do the best. And ultimately, we all need to become cheerleaders for whoever is our leader. And of course, course correct and voice our opinion if we think whatever they're doing is incorrect. But where we are, and the next 4 years is likely going to be with this leader.
Yeah, exactly. And I got to say, I don't mind saying this, the trip to the White House yesterday, in my little humble opinion here, in my little slice of Canada, from the outside looking in, at least what we saw on the news and everything else, I think it was a success from Canada's perspective.
Yeah, I think so. I think, I don't know, the analogy that comes to mind is that Mark Carney went in there and just sort of stuck his head in his turtle shell and just sort of made sure that things didn't blow up for him or for the country that he was representing, keeping the peace, but still sort of putting forward the notion that, yeah, Canada's not for sale.
Yeah, we were chatting about this offline, my friends, and one of the things when you're talking to, whether it's a crowd of one or a crowd of many, you've got to know who your audience is and understand what. I don't know if you can understand what makes Trump ticks, but you have to understand where he's coming from and how to speak to him and use the language that perhaps he may listen to. And the fact that Carney found that common ground of real estate, I think he hit the nail on the head. And my favorite line in the whole thing, or the little soundbite, was this is Mark Carney speaking. I'm paraphrasing somewhat here, obviously. Over the last couple of months of campaigning, I've talked to the owners of Canada, and Canada is not for sale. I thought that was just a magical line, because he did a couple of things. I think, Dion, is he talked to Trump in terms that he would understand, obviously being a real estate developer himself, and validated Canadians with in a respectful way to Donald Trump and the administration there. Yeah.
Yeah, when I see stuff like this, and where the stakes are so high, I always wonder if they have some coaching or training from like psychologists or somebody like that. Like, how do you appeal to the other side? And it's not just negotiation, but it's also personalities and egos, and those are things that you have to sort of tiptoe around and make sure that you can get your point across, but not trigger something in that other person who could really. And you've seen Trump triggered before, and he can just fly off the handle, and that could be the end of it, right? So to be able to still put forward your position without triggering him into losing face or losing his position, that I think was the key.
Yeah, definitely. I saw some little news clips newsreels from coming out of the States, and the anchors or the hosts or the analysts, what have you, they're saying this might be one of the best ways to handle that that interview style with Donald Trump is to sit back, say your couple of things, and sit back and listen. And there's a lot of news outlets out of the entire world that are giving Mark Carney props, his flowers, as the kids say, for how he handled himself and represented Canada. So it's kind of cool when you hear things like that.
I agree. I'll just point out, I think there was one missed opportunity there, going back to the whole real estate analogy that was put forward by Carney, which is, Canada's not for sale, but we have an opportunity for some very good joint venture partnership, right?
There you have it.
Which is, we often use in real estate, which is, one person owns the thing, but somebody else brings something to the party, which results in the best overall outcome for both parties, right? So actually, I remember one of the best images of this I saw in a cartoon format years ago, which was one guy had a piece of bread and one guy had peanut butter. And they were both okay with what they had, but together they could make that peanut butter sandwich, and everybody wins in that regard. So that was a missed opportunity where we could have put forward the whole joint venture, which we actually have in the form of, like, the simplest example is the vehicle manufacturing industry, where those parts cross the border so many times, as all the Canadians have learned in the last 6 months. We become experts on how all this vehicle stuff is put together. But that's a great example of joint ventures, and I think that's how it's always really been between Canada and the U.S.
It really is, and I'm a little. I'll use the word cautiously excited over the next few months to see how this all unfolds. Joint ventures like this and how you explained it typically provides that win-win, and I know that's obviously what both countries are looking for, and some stability moving forward for both nations. And in fact, and of course, Canada, yes, we want stability here, and it'll be nice to kind of put this behind us for a while and focus on other things other than this, right?
Yeah, it's very hard to move forward when you don't know what tomorrow brings in terms of trade relations. So hopefully we're back to normal, whatever that is in today's world.
Back to normal. We've heard some things already come out of the Carney office. Less immigration, focusing on more affordable housing, all the things that you and I like to talk about, and it helps all Canadians everywhere, that sort of thing. We can go deep on this, and there's many and more brighter people than at least me that'll talk about Mark Carney and Donald Trump and the elections here. Let's focus on what's going on, Dion, in the mortgage and the lending world from your perspective and how you see it. And one of the things that, especially as we're coming out of spring and into summer shortly here, people are starting to get excited to be outside and drive up north, to drive up the 400 and everywhere else to their cottages or their summer home. And for those that are thinking about buying one, sometimes it's not as easy as going shopping and buying a cottage, is it? It takes a little bit more planning to do from the lending side.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, now is a good time to have this conversation coming into spring and then, summertime, when everybody's at the cottage. People start to think, maybe should I or could I buy a cottage? And so this has been a topic of conversation just this week. And I always love to share stories from the last week. So I'll tell you a story of a client who has been working with us for a while. And they reached out and they said, Dion, I'd like to sort of explore, what it could be in regards to, for me and my family buying a cottage. So it's a little bit different. I'll start from just the overall qualifying perspective. Okay, so let's say that you already have your own house and you have a mortgage on that house. Obviously, that mortgage payment you had to prove you could service based on your personal debt load and income and credit score. Okay. When we go to buy another property, in this case, a cottage vacation property, for the most part, it's going to be under what we call a second home program, where you effectively have to qualify for not just your mortgage, but also this cottage mortgage. So you're effectively trying to prove to the lender that you can carry two mortgages. Now, maybe like my client, you've got a very small mortgage of $100,000 on your property. He's trying to take on a mortgage for $600,000, and the household income can support that. Total debt of $100,000 plus $600,000 is $700,000. Their household could manage that. Household income of close to $200,000 they had. But if you already had a $500K mortgage and you need a $600K property, this particular client, they wouldn't qualify because their income wouldn't be able to support both of those particular mortgages with the debt loads they had on their vehicles and other things. So the question there is, can you effectively support two mortgages? And some people can and some people can't.
Yeah, yeah, that's good insight. Now let's kind of get into some of the specifics because, as you know, as many do, we're scrolling MLS and or Realtor.ca, your favorite app, and you're looking at the listings and the kind of the big thing is there's almost like two price categories in a sense. One, you'll see 4-season cottages and 3-season cottages, and there's typically a price difference in that. You might get excited about the 3-season because you're thinking, I don't want to go there in the winter anyways. However, tell us and educate us because that might have an effect on the type of financing that's available to you, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So first, let's just sort of get clear on the definition. So a 4-season cottage is a cottage that you can reside in the entire year, 12 months of the year. A 3-season cottage is one that is not livable in the months in the colder months, right? So in the winter months, because the property is not winterized, or the local municipality doesn't clear road access to the property. So you could have a winterized property, but if the municipality doesn't have snow clearing, because some of these, and you know this, Gary, they're all called county road this or fire route this. They're back roads, right? They're not really a priority for many municipalities, especially if the municipality believes that that's really just sort of a summertime location. So if you can't access the property, it's gonna cause problems for financing, depending on the lender and the type of product that we're trying to get. So if we're trying to get a regular conventional mortgage from a major bank where you're putting down more than 20% or more, then a 3-season cottage is fine. Once we're going to CMHC or insured mortgages, in many cases, we're going to need that cottage to be winterized and 4-season in order for the insurer to be able to provide insurance to lend on that property. So it does depend on what kind of product you're aiming for. But yeah, 3-season, 4-season, it does make a difference. And if you happen to own a cottage and you want it to be the most marketable on the market, then you might want to spend the 10 grand on winterizing the pipes or whatever the things that need to happen for the property to be 4-season.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, going down that hole, the rabbit hole of, kind of dotting the I's and crossing the T's, water source, and we've got all sorts of different types of things here, whether it's well or municipal or right from the lake. How does that affect our financing?
Yeah, this is a great question and one that kind of catches a lot of people off guard because it's not a question that comes up when you're buying in a major city. But when you're buying in rural areas, where the water comes to the property or how you source your water is actually important. So if it's municipal water, there's no questions, you're fine. But for the most part, when you're in cottage country, you're getting your water from either the lake that your property is close by to, or a well that has been dug on site, and then you're effectively getting water from that. Now, a lot of lenders, well, actually all lenders will require confirmation of the safety of the drinkability of that water. And the terminology there is the potability of the water. And so when you're buying a property and let's say it has well water, you actually are required to take a sample of that water to the municipality, have them test it, and provide you with a certificate to confirm that the water on the property is drinkable and safe. Okay, and as it relates to directly from the well, maybe you've got directly from the lake. Again, they need to do that testing. But what I've also noticed, Gary, recently is that most lenders require the fitting of a UV filter, which means that the water, before the water hits the tap in your faucet, it's already filtered through UV filter, which makes it drinkable. So sometimes a lender will ask for proof of the existence of the fitting of a UV filter to lake water sourced properties.
And all the things that Dean was just mentioning, if you live in the suburbs, the city, what have you, this all might be brand new and foreign to you, and maybe terms you've never heard of. If you live on the outskirts or on property or any sort of acreage, this is all normal. Especially around York region, you get outside. I can think of where my parents live on a few acres. That's all stuff they've had for years. So it's nothing crazy or out of the blue or you've never heard of it before. These are practices that happen every day, and people, it just becomes a part of life, and having these sorts of water filtration systems, that's normal. So don't be afraid about it, is my point, because they're everywhere. They're not in the city centers because the municipality is already taking care of all that kind of stuff, right? My next question for this, and maybe this is where we kind of wrap it up, because this is the important one. I want to go buy that property, that cottage property, that summer home. I understand that there's pieces to it, like your water and the insulation or the seasonality of the property, where it is, and that sort of thing. My question, Dion, is there less mortgage products? Is it harder to qualify? Is there a different qualification process for these types of properties? Talk to us about that.
Okay, so no, it's quite widely available, but in terms of ability to qualify, I'll tell you this: on your principal residence, credit scores in sort of the mid to low 600s, we can still kind of get away with. When we're doing cottages, I find that this upper threshold of sort of 680 is more commonly expected. And that's because, you're taking on 2 mortgages across 2 properties. You've got one on your place, you've got a new one on the next place. And they expect those people to be in a stronger financial position. Now, it's not technically written in that way, but I can tell you that if a client comes to me and they've got a credit score of 630 and they're trying to buy a cottage, I know things are going to be challenging.
Understood. And I think this is where a lot of people perhaps they may not know the fact that that credit score has a huge effect on their future borrowing ability. And maybe in one of our next videos, Dion, we dive deeper into how the credit score and purchases and things like that affect that score and where that lines up for everybody. Because I find we always need to circle back to that every so often, just for that reminder.
Yeah, you bet. Happy to talk about it.
Excellent. My friends, lots going on in the Canadian real estate landscape, but summer brings summer cottaging. And I know if you're like me, if you go anywhere, whether it's up to the cottage, a friend's cottage for the weekend, or you're traveling somewhere, you play the game. Could I live here? Could we live here? We all do it. And having a friend like Dion can certainly help that answer, because there's people that take action on it. Dion, how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, kangamortgage.ca or Instagram at @DionBeg.
There you have it, my friends. That's Dion Beg. I'm Gary McGowan. We'll see everybody in the next one. Bye for now.